someone to wash my sins away. And now I sing a brand new song, Amazing Grace. Christ Jesus paid a debt that I could never pay. He paid that debt at Calvary. He cleansed my soul and set me free. I'm glad that Jesus did all my sins erase. I now can sing a brand new song, Amazing Grace. Christ Jesus paid a debt that I could never pay. One day he's coming back for me to live with him eternally. Won't it be glory to see him on that day? I then will sing a brand new song, Amazing Grace. Christ Jesus paid a debt that I could never pay.
Earth holds no treasures but perish with using, however precious they be. Yet there's a country to which I am going, heaven holds all to me. Heaven holds all to me. Brighter its glory will be. Joy without measure will be my treasure. Heaven holds all to me. Out on the hills of that wonderful country, happy, contented, and free. Loved ones are waiting and watching my coming. Heaven holds all to me. Heaven holds all to me. Brighter its glory will be. Joy without measure will be my treasure. Heaven holds all to me. Why should I long for the world with its sorrows, when in that home o'er the sea millions are singing the wonderful story? Heaven holds all to me. Heaven holds all to me. Brighter its glory will be. Joy without measure will be my treasure. Heaven holds all to me. Here we are but straying pilgrims, here our path is often dim, but to cheer us on our journey still, we sing this wayside hymn. Yonder over the rolling river, where the shining mansions rise, soon will be our home forever, and the smile of the blessed Giver gladdens all our longing eyes. Here our feet are often weary on the hills that throng our way. Here the tempest darkly gathers, but our hearts within us say, yonder over the rolling river, where the shining mansions rise, soon will be our home forever, and the smile of the blessed Giver gladdens all our longing eyes. Here our souls are often fearful of the pilgrim's lurking foe, but the Lord is our defender, and he tells us we may know. Yonder over the rolling river, where the shining mansions rise, soon will be our home forever, and the smile of the blessed Giver gladdens all our longing eyes. Time is filled with swift transition. Naught of earth unmoved can stand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Trust in him who will not leave you, whatsoever years may bring. If by earthly friends forsaken, still more closely to him cling. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Covet not this world's vain riches that so rapidly decay. Seek to gain the heavenly treasures. They will never pass away. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. When your journey is completed, if to God you have been true, fair and bright the home in glory, your enraptured soul will view. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Hold to his hand, to God's unchanging hand. Build your hopes on things eternal. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty. Early in the morning our song shall rise to thee. Holy, 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 merciful and mighty, God in three persons, blessed Trinity. Holy, 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 all the saints adore thee, casting down their golden crowns around the crystal sea. Cherubim and seraphim falling down before thee, who wast and art and evermore shall be. Holy, 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 though the darkness hide thee, though the eye of sinful man thy glory may not see, only thou art holy, there is none beside thee, perfect in power, in love and purity. Holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, all thy works shall praise thy name in earth and sky and sea. merciful and mighty, God in three persons, blessed Trinity. There's not a friend like the lowly Jesus, no, not one, no, not one. None else could heal all our soul's diseases, no, not one, no, not one. Jesus knows all about our struggles. He will guide till the day is done. There's not a friend.
Good evening. It is about time for us to get started here. Welcome to our Wednesday night service here at the Broad Street congregation. We're glad you can be here. Those who may be joining us online as well, we welcome you. Before we dive in tonight, I had an announcement up here. It was about Michael Webb, who is a gentleman who's been attending here with his family the last few weeks. He had an accident at work today and injured his foot, lost 4 toes, and has been airlifted to Skyline in Nashville. So if we can remember Michael Webb and his family in our prayers as he is dealing with that. Haven't had any updates. I think that was announced, sent out maybe to the elders earlier today, but haven't had any updates since then. But remember Michael Webb if you can. Tonight, we're going to be diving into a topic that every single one of us deals with every single day, and that is our words. The lesson tonight is titled The Power of Speech, and we're going to primarily be looking at the book of Proverbs, as I think has been the theme the last few weeks, sprinkling in some New Testament as well. Before I get too far in, I'll ask for participation right off the bat. If you were to guess, what do you think my biggest fear was in high school and college? First part of college, at least. My biggest fear? Public speaking. You might think that. It was actually girls, but public speaking was a pretty close second. So naturally, of course, somewhere along the way, we wound up here talking to you tonight. Public speaking. Our speech definitely matters. I'll ask for another show of hands. How many in the last week have said something that you wish that you could take back? I see some hands. Some of you who didn't raise your hand are either very disciplined, you have been living in silence the last week, or your spouse is elbowing you right now, knowing that maybe there's something that you should have raised your hand for. Yeah, words are, really tricky things. They tend to slip out fast, and they carry a lot more power than we often realize. They can cut deeper than a knife. They can heal better than medicine sometimes. They create relationships. They start wars. They define our relationships really in a lot of ways. I've heard it said before that words are free. It's how you use them that can cost you. So today we're going to look at Proverbs, see what God has to say about the power of speech, how they can harm, how they can heal, and a little bit about why it's so hard to control our speech. So first, let's talk about why words matter. Starting with Proverbs 18:21. Proverbs 18:21, and most of mine I think are from the ESV tonight. It says, "Death and life are in the power of the tongue, and those who love it will eat its fruit." That's some pretty heavy words, death and life. I don't think Solomon here is being dramatic. He's being realistic, because every conversation that we have plants seeds of life or seeds of death, and sooner or later we're going to eat the fruit of that. If you think about creation itself, how powerful words have been all throughout history. Creation began with God speaking, "Let there be light." Jesus healed with words like, "Be clean," or "Your faith has made you well." And sin itself entered through, basically through words, through Satan whispering to Eve in the garden. Did God really say that you would die if you ate this fruit? Words really do shape the world around us in a lot of ways. So when you think about words that have changed your life, both good and or maybe bad, anything that come to mind? Not everybody at once. That shape your life. Words that have shaped your life in one way or another. I thought about that one. Those are some pretty important words. I do.
I think the things our children hear from us really is formidable for their future.
Yeah. And that goes both directions, very far in both directions for sure. I've met a lot of people whose lives have been changed by someone saying, I believe in you, or you can do this. And I also know several who still carry the pain from somebody telling them, well, you'll never amount to anything. I personally have relationships with some folks who, while otherwise are healthy relationships, are still scarred by something that they or I said to one another. Even though you can heal from certain things, you still carry those with you a lot of times. Thankfully, in my life, I think the good generally outweighs the bad by a pretty far margin, because I've had a lot of people who've shaped my life in great ways. Of course, spouse and grandparents and parents all have been very encouraging throughout my life. But I think about, as I was preparing this lesson, I started to reflect on an old preacher at Madison County Church of Christ, Johnny Campbell. I don't know if anybody of you knew him. He's been passed away for several years now, but I remember when I was 7 or 8 years old, he walks up to me and hands me a book. And I can't remember exactly how it was titled, but it basically said, what it means to be an elder in the Lord's church. I'm like, he's thinking ahead, for the next generation, and I, don't know if I'll ever, get to that point, but it's certainly something to aspire to be a leader in the church. I was also going through old voicemails actually the other day, kind of deleting some stuff off my phone, and there was another saint who has passed on from the Bargerton congregation, Miss Billy Kaufman. She passed away a few years ago, and she had left the sweetest voicemail on my phone. I don't know if it was to me or my wife, but she was just calling and saying, I want to thank you for the flowers. I love you guys so much. And, and things like that stick with us. They encourage us. I'll share one more that came to mind. Clarissa, she's coming up on 8 years old now, but I remember a time when she was about a year old, and she was very precocious. She was an early talker, but she was a terrible sleeper. And I remember one night pacing the hallways, holding her in your arms, you're trying to get to sleep. You lay her down in bed, you don't do it just right, and she wakes right back up, and you start all over again. She was about a year old, and just the very first night, she looked up at me and said, I love you, Dada, and then just fell asleep immediately. And of course, I was just racked. My heart was about to explode with love, but also guilt for being frustrated. But the words that people say to us, good and bad, they have a tendency to echo far, far, far longer than maybe we initially think when we say things. Proverbs 12:6 says, the words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright delivers them. Another idea about how powerful our words can be, the fact that they can rescue someone. And then, of course, in the New Testament, in Matthew 12:36 through 37, Jesus reminds us and says, I tell you, on the day of judgment, people will give account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. That's pretty sobering when you think about it. It's not just the evil words necessarily, not just the good ones, but the careless ones, the thoughtless ones. It shows, I think, how much weight God puts on something that maybe we toss around casually sometimes. Words have consequences, and because God cares deeply about what we say, we've got to be careful how we choose to wield our speech. So I want to look first, if you have a good news, bad news situation, we often say, let's talk about the bad news first. So let's talk about the power of words to harm. So the darker side of the truth about how powerful our words are is that they definitely do have the power to harm us. Proverbs 12:18 says, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrust. That's pretty vivid imagery when you think about it. We're not talking about a paper cut here. We're talking about the point of a sword. It pierces. It's deep. It's lasting. It's painful. Words, how do I put this? I thought about, an illustration, how words are really they can be like a hammer, right? So in the right person's hand, it can be a tool that's used to build something, to build a house, to build one another up. But in a different person's hand, that same tool can be used to destroy something as well. When our words are sharp or sarcastic, or when we have impatience in our words, that hammer can swing the wrong way. Proverbs 15:1 adds, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." I'm pretty sure that that verse was written for every married couple in history, you know. Have you ever been in an argument with your spouse and you reach a point, like this critical point, where you could say the right thing and you could end the argument and let things lie, or you could win it? You know what I mean? That never ends very well. Does not end well. So when we are in the depth maybe of saying the wrong thing, when our words aren't coming out the right way, or maybe we're intentionally misusing them, anybody have suggestions to share about ways that you can extricate yourself from that situation, a way to avoid saying things in anger? I don't know who went over here. leave the room. Just get out of there for a while.
Brian, I was going to say something that I did at Sardis when I was going to church down there.
Mm-hmm.
The man had a business meeting, and the preacher and one of the guys in the meeting was kind of going at each other with words.
Sure.
And I just spoke up and said, "I tell you what, let's do. Let's have a prayer." We had a prayer. After that, these two hugged each other, and then we went on. So that's what I suggest, you know, is if it gets too bad, then that might be something to do.
Right. That's a good suggestion as well. I was talking to Emily the other day, and we were just having a conversation. She said, she was expecting maybe to have a difficult conversation with someone, and it was about a certain topic. And she said, we were just talking about maybe how to handle that. And I think sometimes the best thing to do is to not have that conversation. If it's not important in the grand scheme of things, sometimes it's better for us to say, "Hey, I think that maybe our relationship is more important than us having a conversation about this topic, and we're going to both leave each other more amenable than if we talked about this to begin with." Not saying that it's okay to avoid everything, because some things you have to talk about, and some situations you can't do that with. Sometimes we can't leave the room, but I think it's important to consider the implications and how important the conversation is before we let our words get away with us and ruin what might be an otherwise good relationship. I almost hate to say this because Emily's home with Nolan right now, and she's probably watching this. But I'm going to give you a little insight. If you ever want to get under her skin, give her something with glitter. She is not a glitter fan, and I tend to agree with her. It's for good reason. But cards and gift bags and things like that, we tolerate it. It's fine. But she might mutter under her breath a little bit about it. But I thought about the fact that something else that we often deal with, which is gossip. Gossip is a lot like glitter. It tends to stick to everything, and you can never quite clean it all up. Even if you try to apologize and put that toothpaste back in the tube, so to speak, it's impossible to do it entirely. If we look at James 3, I didn't have any specific verse here, but it deals with the tongue, and we'll come back to James in just a moment. But it talks about how the tongue is a spark that can set an entire forest ablaze. And that's kind of terrifying. One small phrase, one thoughtless post, one angry text, and suddenly a relationship that was otherwise good or decent is up in smoke. We've got to be careful with our words, whether it's intentional misuse or idle gossip or letting something slip out carelessly. We've got to remember how much destruction words can cause. As members of Christ's kingdom, why is it even more important for us to be mindful of our words? correct? That's right. Yeah.
And we're admonished to consider other people, their needs ahead of our own.
Sure.
And more often than not, it seems that when there's a challenge like that, a verbal thing going on, people in general tend to want to get the last word, want to come out on top, whatever it is. Sometimes we have to take the high road and just let somebody else win.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is a reflection on not just ourselves. You know, we're representing something greater than ourselves in the words that we say. And how much truer is that even online? When we think about what we post and what we text and what we say on Facebook and other things like that. If I'm having a face-to-face conversation with you, there are certain things that we can convey through our tone of voice and our body language and things like that. But when you're just reading a wall of text from somebody or typing a wall of text to somebody, I think a lot of things get lost in translation, and it's easy enough to misconstrue what someone is saying when you're face-to-face, much less online, because our tone matters when we're in conveying our intentions. And I've seen even things that were meant for good and for positivity be taken in the wrong way. And the wrong tone of voice can definitely cause harm. It's not just about what we say, but about how we say it. And it's important to make sure that we're conveying our words in love, because even the right thing said in the wrong way can still cause harm. The good news is that the words that we say also have the power to heal and do more than just harm. Proverbs 16:24. And by the way, I'm so glad that when Bill sent me the list of this topics to pick from, that I chose this one, because Proverbs is just a wealth of material when it comes to our words and our speech. There's plenty to pull from here. But Proverbs 16:24 says, "Gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body." I think there's something beautiful about that, not just pleasant, but healing. If you think of the power of simple phrases, things like, "I'm proud of you," or "I forgive you," or "I love you," or "You're not alone." These are really, really just short sentences that have the power to heal and to build up. The right thing said to the right person at the right time can change the trajectory of their life, but it doesn't even have to be so grand as that. Saying something can lead others to Christ, but it also can just give them somebody the boost that they're needing in the moment to get through the day and to make it to the next thing. Anybody want to share a time when someone said something to you that helped you through a really, really difficult situation?
Brian, I talk too much, but I'll say this.
Talk away.
This situation happened, my daughter and my son-in-law got divorced. We moved, helped move the stuff out of the house. I moved it over to his stuff, to his daddy's house. PJ helped us move. I had to get somebody to do it. He didn't want to do nothing. He didn't do nothing. With the last load I carried to his house, he called me on the phone. I was in my truck. The two grandboys were with me. And he told me, he said, "Eddie, if you ever come over here, I'll have the police after you," and said a bunch of other things to me. And I said, "Okay, thank you," and I hung up. The boy said, "People, why did you not tell him?" I said, "That would have made me the same thing he was."
Sure.
I didn't want to get down to his thing, so I just done that. Later on in life, he did apologize for what he done this time. But a lot of times, it's not saying back. What I'm saying is that was something that really got to me, but I don't know that I done it right. At least I didn't let him get me down to his second.
Right.
And it worked out.
Yeah. Sometimes it's better just to let it lie.
Yeah.
Let's look at Proverbs 25:11. It says, "A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver." What does it mean here when it says a word fitly spoken? Any insight? spoken diplomatically. That's a good way to put it, actually.
Right time, my Bible says.
Says what?
Word spoken at the right time.
Word spoken at the right time. Yeah, it's kind of what I said before. Again, the right word at the right moment, maybe the right word coming from a specific person, spoken in the right tone. If we're careful, and if, like Bill said, if we're putting the needs of others first and we're attentive to what others need, I think we have a lot of opportunity to encourage and say things that are meaningful. And the Bible even says, in this verse, this is like gold in settings of silver. What I take that to mean is that it's rare, it's priceless, it's something that you can't put a value on those kinds of situations. And sometimes the most healing words are the quietest ones. Maybe it's just listening and empathizing and saying, I hear you. May not understand exactly what you're going through, but I'm here to help. I'm here to listen. Even in evangelism and ministry, our words can bring eternal healing, right? In Romans 10, it says that faith comes by hearing the word. So, sharing Christ, sharing God's word is literally sharing life with other people. And then Ephesians 4:29 urges us. It says, "Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for the building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear." Every word that we speak should be like a construction project. We're trying to build something good for others, and it definitely can happen. So why is all of this so challenging? The hard truth is that it's easy to say some of this stuff, but it's hard to live it out in a lot of cases. So I told you we're going to come back to James. James 3, verses 7 through 8. It says, "Every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison." So if no one can tame it, does that mean we are doomed with our words? I don't think so. James reminds us that we can't tame it on our own. We need God's help to transform not just our speech, but also our heart. Because then in Luke 6:45, it says, "The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil. For out of the abundance of the heart, his mouth speaks." So when you take these two verses in concert with one another, what's that telling us? If we want to speak good to other people, where does it start? In the heart. If our heart is full of anger and pride and bitterness, guess what's going to come out of our mouth? I think about, I like to sleep late as I can, even on the work days, so I get up, I get ready, and then I'm out the door. So I don't often get to wake up in the morning and just, sit down and enjoy a cup of coffee. But sometimes on Saturdays or other days when I'm off, I do. So I'll go and I'll pour my steaming cup of black coffee, and about the time I go to sit down on the couch, that's about the time that one or more of my children, they want to come and jump in your lap. And of course I'm yelling, hot coffee, because I know that if I don't warn them about that we're about to have a very bad time for me and the kids and the couch. Much like children, life has a habit of kind of jumping in our laps, so to speak, or shoving us at the worst possible time. And whatever it is in that cup that we're holding has a tendency to spill out. Are there any times in our lives, what I call these bump moments, where it's harder to control our tongue than others? Anybody deal with road rage? I've gotten calmer over the years. I used to be a little bit of a speed demon in high school and maybe in college and maybe still a little bit, but I'm trying to do better on that. Fortunately, I don't tend to get super angry at folks generally. Although my kids have taken to saying when we're at a red light, go, they heard that somewhere, right? Yeah. Dealing with kids, work stress, family relationships. There's a lot of times to where if we're not careful, life is going to throw things at us, and what's in our hearts and what we're filling our hearts and minds with is going to spill over. I don't know who actually said this quote. Some attribute it to Abraham Lincoln, some to Mark Twain. But there's a quote that I've seen posted before. It says, "Better to remain silent and be thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt." I think this is actually something of a biblical principle, and I'm sure probably where this phrase actually came from. If you read Proverbs 21:23, it says, "Whoever keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps himself out of trouble." And then Proverbs 17:28 says, "Even a fool who keeps silent is considered wise. When he closes his lips, he is deemed intelligent." We've said this really before already in this class, but sometimes the smartest thing we can do is just to say nothing at all. But man, sometimes that's hard. It's harder than saying the right thing. Sometimes it's just to stop talking. Taming the tongue is hard. Words are hard. And it's impossible for us to do that alone. But it's not about perfection. It's about progress. And it's about allowing God to fill our hearts so that, when something does overflow, that it's from Him, and allowing Him to refine the things that we say and that we communicate to others. So let's talk about some practical ways, hopefully, that we can apply this lesson. So everything else up to this point has been my own research and me kind of speaking from the Bible here. These are ways that I'm really talking to myself here. So how can we control our words? Just a few things I thought of as I was putting this lesson together. And again, we've said some of this. One is just a pause before responding. Even a short pause, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 5 seconds even sometimes, can help to prevent a whole lot of regret later on. If you look at Proverbs 29:20, it warns, "Do you see a man who is hasty in his words? There is more hope for a fool than for him." I mean, that 3-second pause can certainly be the difference between a lot of peace and a lot of pain. And of course, Eddie, you said this just a moment ago. Pray. Pray about it in the heat of the moment, but also pray daily for our words. There's a Psalm 19:14, and I think it would be a great daily prayer, probably for a lot of us, but especially for me. It says, "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord." Most of us have heard that verse before many, many times, but I think that's worth bearing in mind and keeping in the forefront. It's probably worth writing on a sticky note and putting it on the dash of your car by the mirror. "Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight, O Lord." I think if we prayed that prayer more often, maybe we'd be a little bit more conscious about the things that we say. And the other one, and this is really me speaking to myself, is to practice more gratitude. If we compliment more freely, if we say thank you more often, just like prayer, I think gratitude has the potential to disarm negative words and harmful words. And that's still hard to do in the heat of the moment. But if you're having a difficult time, an argument with somebody, especially somebody that's close to you, if you can have the presence of mind to just take a step back and think about something positive about that person, it becomes easier to let the negative words kind of clear out of our minds and look for the positive things. And another one, kind of along that same line, is to encourage intentionally. Hebrews 3:13 says, "Encourage one another daily." I mean, we got to wait for a special occasion to encourage. I will say that many of you in this room, most of you in this room, are great examples to me of that. And it's not just me when I'm up here speaking. I've noticed whenever any of my fellow young peers are up here, if you peek your head in the door after class, they're covered up in folks, saying how much they appreciate it, and that's meaningful. I mean, that's helpful, and it's not just applies to us. It's worth being proactive about that and thinking about others throughout just our daily lives, and being positive just in general and encouraging to one another. But doing that intentionally can also help to diffuse heated situations when our words may come more slowly than others. As I go through these, I'm just thinking these are kind of getting harder and harder to do. But the other one is to apologize quickly. What happens when we have a heated discussion and we leave it to fester for a while? that good for anybody involved? No. I mean, what's the end result of that? What if we never apologize? What happens? It festers. It grows. It almost becomes this insurmountable, mountain to get past. And maybe you don't even remember, how something started, but if we let things like that go on, even if it's not something that's our fault, I think the burden still lies on us to be the bigger person and maybe to apologize, even if we don't necessarily feel like we should. But a quick apology is definitely more healing and faster than a delayed one when you leave wounds to fester, for sure. And lastly, for practical applications, and you guys are welcome to share more if you think of anything. And I mentioned this before, but it's guard your words online or through digital communication in general. Proverbs doesn't mention social media, but if it had, I think there would have been a Proverbs that says, "Think before you post." We'll leave that at that. So, any thoughts here? Any volunteers on other steps we could make the most impact on your life right now? I'm not asking for you to share your struggles. I mean, I'll tell you the apologizing and and just stopping and being thankful are probably the biggest things that I need to work on. I'm going to work on all of them, but I think those would be the two most helpful things in my life.
Ryan,
Yes, ma'am.
when it comes to social media,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to blame this on my age, I didn't know that there was etiquette in typing.
Okay.
And it was just easier because most of the things that I did on my computer
Sure.
were caps locked.
Right.
So I just had caps locked on.
Right.
And I just typed a message.
Sure.
And I got informed that I was yelling at them, and I had no intention of yelling, and it was to my boss. So that was not a good thing. But, just in case somebody else doesn't realize that, don't leave caps locks on.
Turn your caps locks off. Good
Because you could get
good
in lots
advice.
of trouble.
That's right.
But those kind of things are things that I think we all do, even just in talking
Sure.
sometimes. I know Bill's hard of hearing, so he fusses at me because he says, "Quit yelling at me." But I'm not trying to yell, I'm trying to be loud. And it doesn't come across as loud to me,
Right.
it comes across as yelling to him,
Sure.
which I don't mean it to be that way. So it's just sometimes situations that we don't realize what we're doing,
Sure.
how it sounds, that comes across.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Hey, she means it.
No, I don't. All the time, anyway.
Yeah, it's easy to stick our feet in our mouth sometimes, and just say something without really realizing it. And of course, the online etiquette. I hope I'm not sticking my foot out in my mouth right now. But there's a website online. It's called Old People Facebook, and it's just people posting screenshots of their grandparents or their aunts and uncles, and then usually it's pretty harmless. It's the silly things that they say, but then also sometimes it's things that somebody needs to step in and help grandma out and give her a little guidance maybe, or take the phone away. I don't know. Yeah, but for me, I think gratitude is probably the biggest one. Stopping, and I think I even said this probably about this time last year during our deacons post or pre-Thanksgiving service. Haven't forgotten about your text, by the way, Bill.
I just sent another one.
Good.
To remind you guys.
Good. That's right. But yeah, I mean, I think I said that from up here, that one of the things that I struggle with, and maybe it's a little bit better, but still something that is important, is not just thinking about the things that we say, the gratitude that I have towards other people, but actually expressing that. People need to hear it. It would improve lots of relationships. Not that I'm just thinking of anything bad in particular right now, but letting other people know how thankful you are for them, it can definitely help things for sure. All right. So I'm going to wrap up here in just a moment, but talk about Proverbs 15:4 first. It says, "A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit." And so as we start to close, that's really what I want to leave us with tonight. You think about the image of a tree of life. Our words can be like branches that provide shade and fruit and beauty to those around us. Or our words can be like the axe that chops that tree down. Every conversation, every whisper, every post, ultimately we're choosing if we want to heal or to hurt. And so as we go through the week, when we're thinking about, or rather talking to our spouse, our children, our coworkers, or the cashier who may come off as a little bit rude to us, who may just be having a rough day, I think, if we stop and ask ourselves the question and have the presence of mind to say, am I about to speak life or death to someone? It would really be a great benefit, because the world, I think, has enough criticism. It has enough sarcasm, enough cynicism. I think what it needs are more people who speak truth with love and who offer grace with their words. Comments? Questions? We're a little bit early.
Brian?
Yes, sir.
You said you brought back earlier too or something, but a lot of times when you say something and you try to apologize, you don't do it. Sometimes I'll teach Gary Saw's class in 7th and 8th grade, and I told them, and they was talking about the tongue and all, and I said, I can brag on y'all all the time we're in here, but I can say one bad thing, and when you leave here, what are you going to remember? The one bad thing.
Sure.
And that's what our tongue does. A lot of times we don't realize it. I mean, you can apologize and say, hey, I done it, but you've already done it.
Right.
So that's my problem a lot of times. I talk too much, but I do try to watch what I say.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, yes, going back to the glitter example of the toothpaste. I mean, once it's out, you can take some steps to clean it up and take it back as much as you can. But once you say it, it's out there, right? Once you post it, it's out there. Somebody has seen it. Somebody knows about it. Hard to take it back sometimes. So it's just probably more important to think about what we say before we say it versus just letting it, trying to apologize. With our words, we can't take the ask forgiveness, not permission stance. There's some places in life where that might apply, but not with our words, not with the things that we say, for sure. Anybody else have anything to add?
I think sometimes, instead of using words, we as Christians, this is big, is to listen more.
Mm-hmm.
People like to have someone who will really listen to them and hear what they're saying, and then maybe speak back, but to keep your mouth shut more and really listen to other people. I
Sure.
think that really means a lot to people, and that we would be more Christ-like if that's what we did, instead
sure.
of always thinking about we've got to have a response. Just very active, really listening to someone, and then and that's something I have to kind of remind myself to do.
Very, very relevant. Listening, to use the old cliche, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as much as we speak. That's. I thought about as I was preparing this lesson. And my job is talking to people about finances and investments and money. But really, when you boil down what I do for a living now, is I talk for a living. Is really what it is. But it's important when I'm sitting there with clients and they're explaining to me their financial situation. If I'm not listening to what they're saying, then I really don't have a solution to offer them, because I'm just thinking about, if all I'm thinking about is how I'm going to respond and moving on to the next meeting client. I mean, and that's even more true, in our Christian lives, because if we've got somebody in front of us, that's talking to us and telling us about their life, about their circumstances, their situation, and all we're thinking about is the next thing that we're going to say, there's missed opportunity there for sure in a lot of cases. We might avoid just being able to be that person that brings them to Christ if they don't feel heard or listened to, for sure. And of course that applies to relationships with other Christians as well.
When you were talking about apologies and apologizing,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a thing that we have to think about too. You don't just say words.
Right.
You've got to actually mean it, because if you apologize and it doesn't come from the heart, the other person can tell it.
Oh, yeah.
And then nothing you say from that point on is going to be valid or validated in their mind at all.
Right.
So you have to mean what you say. So if you don't mean it, you're best to keep your mouth closed.
And that situation, yeah, you really do more harm than good in that, in that scenario. I mean, you wind up worse off than if you just said nothing at all. Yeah, we as humans are pretty good at intuiting if folks, really mean what they say or not. In a lot of cases, maybe not always. There's some convincing people out there for sure. But I think, especially in circumstances of the heart, usually we are pretty good judges on if they actually mean what they're saying or not. And the reverse is true when we're on the other side of that scale as well. Very, very true. Kind of goes back to that verse we read earlier, about careless words and and empty words. It matters. Matters to God. Should matter to us. Yes, sir.
We have to keep in mind too that there's always people watching us.
Mm-hmm.
May not be who we're having a conversation with, but people watch to see how we react to what's said. And that can be really good for the church or really bad for the church.
For sure.
Or our well-being, We make a bad impression because we snap back and we could have just been quiet. People notice that.
Yeah. Yep. There's always somebody watching and listening, even if it's not the person that we're talking to necessarily. Great thoughts.
This subject came up today, and there was a friend of mine who told me, he said, a friend of hers in the group had made a comment. She said that evening, when she was thinking about it, and it was a comment that was very hurtful to her, whether it was meant to be for her or not. So she decided she would, the next day, talk to him and confront it,
Mm-hmm.
because this was a good friendship. And they worked it out. It wasn't meant for her, but they worked it out. Had not she have done that, it would have been a bad friendship gone bad.
Yeah, situations like that, you let fester, and yeah.
Harder she would have felt.
Right. I'll speak from personal experience to that, because I'm the type of person that, on one hand, when we're talking about the general populace, I don't put a whole lot of stock in what people think about me necessarily. I mean, maybe I should more than I do. But if I hear of specific situations to where I know that somebody out there just doesn't like me for some reason, I have a hard time letting that rest until I kind of dig into it a little bit, and because I'm a problem solver, I want to figure out, well, what's the issue? What can we do to fix that? One of my coworkers was meeting with a client one day, and he told me about the meeting later. He said, "Yeah, that girl really doesn't like you." I'm like, "Well, I have no idea who that person is. Like, I've never spoken to them before." Well, in fact, it wound up being my neighbor, and we had just moved, and so I had met this person one time while we were building our house. She'd come over to talk to us, and apparently, I guess maybe I was just busy. We were working on stuff, and I left the wrong impression. And so, that just eats away at me. So I'm driving home that night, I'm thinking about it, and I'm driving past their house, and I see all of them out in the driveway. They were just out there talking. I'm like, we're going to address this. We're gonna figure out what it is. And so our dog had been going over there, and so I used that as my excuse to go up and strike up a conversation. I was like, hey, just wanted to let you guys know. Sorry if Samson's been an issue. And I never actually brought that up, but I felt better having at least hopefully maybe made a second impression on her. Again, I don't really know what I said or did to leave the wrong impression to begin with, but yeah, if you hear about situations and it's better to address them, I think, and versus letting it fester. Maybe that's not always true. Sometimes it's better to let things lie. But if we know that somebody out there has that wrong impression of us, if we've said something wrong, I think it's in our best interest to at least try to resolve it in some form or fashion. Well, I really appreciate everybody's input and words and participation tonight. Thank you for letting me share for a few minutes with you. If there's nothing else, let's end with a word of prayer, and the night will be yours. Father, we thank you for this time. We thank you for the opportunity that we have to be together, to study your word, and to share with one another. We pray that you help us with our words. We pray that you set a guard over our mouths and just keep watch over the things that we say. Help us to use our words to build up and not to break. Help us to bless others and not to burden them. And help our hearts to always be a reflection of Christ in everything that we say. Thank you in Jesus Christ's name. Amen. Thank you, guys.